Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
Back in December, fellas, I invited 10 men of color from this community, the Great Man Within community, to a private Zoom call where I posed 3 questions. The first one was, I asked these men, what has been your experience in this community as a learner so far? And secondarily, what's been your experience as a man of color inside this community? The second question I asked was, what would we need to build in this community, or what would you need to see that would make you enthusiastic to invite other men of color to join us? And thirdly, I asked, what is it that I can personally be doing better, differently, more of to make this an environment where every man can thrive? The impetus for this conversation was based on some interactions I had with Giovanni Beckford, a friend of mine and also a multiple-time guest on the show. He's the man, a black man, and the man who came on the show to talk about your ultimate guide to reading and retaining books. He's wicked smart, phenomenal. And he said that, in his hunger for personal development, he constantly finds himself in personal development environments where he's the only man of color. That got me curious around why that was. And so that's why I decided to host this forum. And that discussion with these 10 men opened a candid and oftentimes uncomfortable series of conversations that were both illuminating and insightful. And in particular, these men helped me to expose a blind spot regarding my own self-awareness, or lack thereof, I guess you could say, of what it's like for non-white men to walk into a community designed by a white man. Like in this case, I'm the white man who designed the Great Man Within community. And there's always this unconscious bias that when it's designed by a white man, that it's for other white men, right? Whether it's with the languaging or the lived experiences. And that really opened my eyes. In order to address that and to change that and to build a different kind of community and a forum, one of the suggestions these men of the group had, or one of the men in the group had, was to raise the visibility of men of color, right? To share the stage, the guys here who are emerging leaders, and bring them onto this podcast platform. So that's exactly what we're doing today. We're having the first of a series of uncomfortable conversations on race with 2 of our prominent leaders in this community, Marcus D. Harvey and Jay Washington. Now, if you've been in the Facebook group, you surely know who these guys are and how vital their contributions have been to the growth and cohesion of our community, right? They're inspiring, they're active, they're provocative, they're vulnerable, constantly in the Facebook group, and so supportive anytime another man shares and opens up. Marcus D. Harvey is an acting coach and an EDI&B consultant. If you don't know what EDI&B means, I'll explain that to you. It stands for equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So Marcus will go into companies and teach on equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging principles. And he has opened my eyes very quickly to some key terms that I needed to know, to some blind spots that I've had. He's a tremendous educator. You guys are going to love him. And Jay Washington is a guy that I met from my former world in financial services. He's a client relationship manager for a large financial services firm. He's an inspiring guy that is constantly opening the kimono to the most vulnerable parts of his life. And he just shares so willingly and generously, and also supports so many other guys in this group, allowing us to see like his example. So we dig deeper, share more, instead of hiding behind, the walls that we guys tend to put up. So in this episode, there are 4 really important terms that Marcus and Jay teach us that I want you to listen for and commit to memory. Here are those 4 terms. Listen closely. Number 1, white spaces. Number 2, power sharing. Number 3, code switching. Number 4, white splaining. All right, I'll say them again. Listen for white spaces and what they are. Power sharing. What does that mean? Code switching. What is that and how does it show up? And then white splaining. What does that mean? And then how do white people do that? One of the most important parts of the conversation comes in the last 15 minutes of this episode when Jay introduces the importance of building your awareness or your willingness and your capability to see beyond your own life experience in order to understand and embrace the experience of someone who's not you. One of the reasons why, guys, that we can't see eye to eye with other humans is because we can't see beyond our own experience. We think that because of the way that we grew up or what we've been taught, like that's the lens through which everyone else sees their life. No, other people have radically different experiences. But if you're only willing to go to the edge of your experience, you're never going to be able to fully understand someone else and how to go beyond that. Eric Maddox, one of our guests in 3 weeks ago's episode of the interrogator who captured Saddam Hussein, that's Eric Maddox. He said the reason why he was able to understand the people he captured that gave him the information that ultimately led to the capture of Saddam Hussein was because he stepped outside of his world and went into their worlds and started to understand them, which allowed them to feel trustworthy and share experiences with him. So for our white listeners, as you listen to this episode, you may find yourself getting triggered or uncomfortable. That's the point. Instead of allowing your next reflex to be defensiveness or building an argument to disagree with Marcus or Jay or me or Brian, instead ask yourself, what about this trigger point is making me uncomfortable? Explore that. Find the root and learn something deeper about yourself. By doing that, you may be able to see beyond your own life experience and hear the deeper wisdom of Jay and Marcus on this show. Enjoy the first of a series of uncomfortable conversations with Black men featuring Jay Washington and Marcus D. Harvey. Brian, brother, I'm particularly excited for you today, man, for this conversation because we have two of the most inspiring men from the Great Man Within Facebook group who have shown up as leaders consistently since we launched the group. And I know this is your first time meeting these two gentlemen. Before we bring them in and introduce them to our audience, I just want to know what has been your impression so far in just our offline discussion with these two guys.
On the spot. Here we go. I can tell this is going to be a high energy podcast. We're going to have some laughs and some learnings. Marcus, we do breath work. We just all did this breath work together that our listeners know that we do prior to a podcast. And I typically feel really in my body when we're doing that. This time I felt in my head because I know we're going to talk about race. And we're going to talk about the Black experience. We're going to talk about all these things. And there's a guarantee that I will fuck this up somehow. And so I'm also nervous. I'm nervous about this conversation and the invitation of both Marcus and Jay. When I do mess up, please let me know, and we'll grow through this together.
That goes second for me. I'm sure that I will say some things that I'm not aware of. I'll trip over myself. The invitation is to correct us, and we will thank you for it. But with that, Marcus Harvey, Jay Washington, two men that I've had an unbelievable chance to grow closer to over these last couple of months as we've been doing our work together. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Glad to be here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you guys here. So let's go one at a time. Why don't you introduce yourselves to our audience? Who are you? What are you up to in this world? Let's start with you, Marcus, and then we'll come to Jay.
Who am I? I am Marcus D. Harvey. That's all lowercase letters, if anyone ever wants to spell it. I'm a performer and arts activist and consultant, primarily in the realm of EDI&B work, that is equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. I'm in New Jersey at the moment. I went for a 30-minute run in the cold this morning, followed by a 2-minute cold ass shower.
I was going to check on that.
2 minutes. Okay. You got it in.
Marcus, why did you do the 2-minute cold shower today?
Because it's part of this 31-day mental tougher man challenge.
That's right.
2 minutes. That's going the distance.
So that's who I am. And excited to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here. Jay, before you introduce yourself, your cold shower has been the nemesis for this entire 31-day challenge. But I was going to say the two of you guys have shown up just as much or more than anyone else. Did you do the 2-minute cold shower this morning, buddy?
I have not done the 2-minute cold shower yet because I went a little long at the gym and then looked at the clock and was like, oh, yeah, that's right. I've got somewhere to be at 10 o'clock and this isn't I'll be right there in 15 minutes. So I will be doing the cold shower promptly after the podcast.
We will hold you to that, my friend. And I'm now wearing like a sweatshirt because I went like a 3-minute cold shower this morning and I could still feel the bone chilling inside of me. So I'm like wrapped up. I got my heat going. Jay, tell the audience here a little bit about you, how we met.
Okay. Jay Washington, uncle, son, liver of life, on my 9 to 5. financial services. I've dedicated my life to helping people secure their retirement. It is my passion. I met Dominic at a Women in Pensions event where, I was getting up to go, and he's like, hey, I'd love to talk to you for a minute, just chat. We had a brief chat, and within 3 minutes, he was able to teach me a lesson that I have now taken seriously and I take to other people, where I was referring to the women I work with as girls. And just in a very simple, non-condescending, just a very, a teaching way said, hey, these are women. They're over the age of 18. They are professionals. They are your equals. You want to refer to them as women. And it was something so simple, but, it made me say, you know what? I like this guy. I like where he's at. Told me about the podcast and, started listening to it and realized how many lessons there were in the podcast that I didn't know I needed to learn that applied, well to me. And, we formed a bond and a rapport and kept in touch. And honestly, between my talks with Dominic, the Tougher Man Challenge, and the inner work, I can honestly say that within the last year, I've probably grown up 2 decades. I've just experienced so much more. And believe me, there is still a way to go.
So I saw Marcus. I think he wanted to interject there and say something about Jay growing up. Yeah.
I was going to say, I can attest to that.
Okay.
I can literally attest to the growth.
Because Marcus and I have known each other now for, maybe 7 years.
Yeah, maybe 7, 8 years.
7, 8 years. So Marcus can attest to the fact that, I have grown up considerably in this past year and a half.
Wait, now, how the hell did you two guys know each other for 7 years? This is news to me. I thought you guys met through this work, but how did you guys know each other for so long?
Don't you know all Black people know each other in this
yes.
world?
We all know each other.
Thank you for correcting me.
I thought that was a rumor I wasn't supposed to repeat. Now I know it's safe.
No. I actually don't even know.
You know what? Mutual friends. I do believe. I think we knew each other through mutual friends.
Yeah.
Just again, through conversation, picked up a rapport and kept in touch. Because matter of fact, I didn't realize Marcus was in the group, and I saw it, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, how do you know Dominic?
Yeah, you sent me a text and was like, how do you? And I was like, well, because Dom and I met at a wedding many, many years ago. My wife was roommates at one point with the bride. And so we met at a wedding. I don't know how we started talking. Were we sitting at the same table? I don't remember.
No, we were it was at the reception, and we were sitting out, we were talking outside. I remember exactly where we were when we started talking, because I didn't know anybody there, and you were one of the guys that just was really disarming. And we had it was a 30 or 45 minute conversation. We stayed in touch. So I've known you for longer than I've known Jay. So I've known you, Marcus, for about 5 or 6 years. Jay, I've known you for about 1.5 years now. And, Jay, to go back to your story, man, you said that you respected me because I taught you something in a very short period of time. I respected the hell out of you for embracing that correction. There are some guys where I pull them aside and I'm just like, hey, here's something that I've had a chance to see. Do you want to hear it? And then they get defensive. And you were just like, no, man, I want to hear that. And not only did you embrace it, but you followed up with me afterwards and thanked me for it. So one of the things that Brian and I always really like to shine a light on are men who are open and willing to being corrected or called forward when there's a blind spot. And that's one of the reasons why we're having a conversation here today, because I certainly know that Brian and I have blind spots, especially around racial issues. And we woke up quite a bit this past year, with a lot that's gone on in our country, but also even through our own men's group, where we have a few Black men in our group who have shown us areas where we've had our heads buried in the sand. So maybe just to start the context for where this idea came from to have this conversation today. About 2 months ago, when I started to see the emergence of men like you showing up in such big ways in the community, the Facebook community, as leaders, showing up as vulnerable guys, sharing parts of your life in really powerful ways. One of the things that I decided to do was to say, I would love to have a Zoom call with the men of color of this community with the intention of understanding, how do we make this a place that's inclusive, that's where you feel like you're represented, where you feel like you'd be proud to bring other men of color in your lives here. And so there were 10 men who graciously agreed to dedicate an hour and a half of your time to helping us answer some of those questions. And I sent out an email in advance to the group before we had that Zoom call, just asking, here's a few questions that I have to prepare for that meeting. And Marcus, this is where I really got a chance to witness you and your power. You sent an email back. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read that message back. And I could see you smiling. You don't mind at all. Okay. So you wrote back to me. You said, hey, Dominic, I got a few questions about the meeting. Number one, what is your desired outcome of this meeting? Is it to expand your reach, or is it to make the community more inclusive? There is a difference between the two. And that was where I was like, this guy's got chops. Question number two, what is the plan after this meeting? After all, just an hour is just a brief talk, right? And I believe that you were looking for, hey, is this just going to be a conversation? We check the box, or are you actually going to do something about this? You said on an EDI&B note, which I didn't know what that stood for. I knew the D&I, but you said equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. What does white space mean to you? And what does the word include look like? And white space is something I'd love for you to define, because that was something that absolutely opened my eyes. And then when you say man of color, what do you mean? I'm willing to talk about all of this stuff, but on a personal note, I'm always a bit guarded when a white man wants to talk about how to make the space more welcoming. It's like, quote, tell me what to do, and that leaves the work on someone else and not them. I know you're coming from a good place, hence why I'm willing to show up and talk. I just feel the need to be honest and transparent. Marcus, my man. That was beautiful. As you're sitting here and reflecting on that, what's coming up for you?
Damn, I said all that. It's the first thing that I like, because I just literally, I don't edit when I type. I just type it and send it. And if it's not grammatically correct, you can figure it out because your brain will make sense of it. But one of the things that I'm keenly aware of is, in the work that I do outside of performing and teaching, is I do a lot of EDI and B work, equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And I always enter white spaces. And what is a white space, right? A white space is the great man within space was created by a white man. That's a white space. It wasn't created by Dominique, Marcus, Jay, and Brian. It was created by a white man. So the perception is this space was created by and for white people. So when I enter a space, I need to know, where does my Blackness fit into that space? How is my Blackness welcomed in that space? And what is the table that I'm going to be sitting at? What does it look like? Or what is the table that you're building, right? Because there's a difference. Marcus is not interested in you just giving me a seat at the table, because I'm entering that white space on your terms. I am interested in you saying, we are knocking the fucking table down and we are building it with you. Here is your seat. Here is the power that you have in the space. And so for me, that's what that email was about. There's a lot of when we saw what happened last year, there was a lot of white-led organizations releasing statements about Black Lives Matter, about being more inclusive. They were releasing statements and wasn't improving policy, right? So I wasn't interested in is this just a conversation to say, I did it, now we can move on? Because a lot of times when people come to me to lead workshops, the work that I do, I said it's S&M for white people. What does that mean? White people like to come to me for me to tell them what's wrong with them racially for a few hours. Then they oh, that felt good. It's no, the work starts after the conversation. How can I hold you accountable? What is your follow-up plan? Show me, who do I need to talk to within the organization? I'm a professional morpher, so I have to morph myself into things to fit into your space to make you comfortable, and I'm no longer interested in that. And so a lot of times what I tell white people is other races don't need you to come in and save them. White people need to learn to save themselves, because a lot of times white people have created this mess that we're in.
Marcus, I'm yeah, agreed. I'm not totally sure how to do it, but I can't ask, or I shouldn't ask, because it's my work to figure out. And so I feel like I'm in this loop of wanting
yes,
and desiring,
mm-hmm.
but now what? And I don't know if the work happens afterwards. Agreed. And now what? And I'm curious, maybe we don't even have to answer that question right now, but I'm curious, you had this meeting with the great man within. I'm curious, like what happened then? Like now what happens?
There have been several open and honest conversations between Dominic and I about like the process and the progress that he wants to make and wants to see. I see him trying to implement the things that we talk about. There's always some resistance to change, and there will be people who don't agree with the changes. Always. And so, yeah, like there is a plan, there is a timeline. These are the sort of kind of things I want to do, the conversations I want to have. And he has never said to me, you know, everyone wants me to tell them what book to read, what thing to listen to. And it's like, Google, you can Google it. Like read the book and then come to me and talk about it.
That's really clear. That's I like that I can get my hands
wrap your arms
that.
around. Yeah, I mean,
Marcus, the first question that you asked Dominic in that email around intention. So is your intention to grow or to be more inclusive? I'm curious, how was that answered? And maybe this is a question for Dominic in this case. How was it answered? And then the second question is why? Like whatever the answer was, like why is that important to you?
How was it answered, Dominic? I don't remember how it was answered.
Yeah, the way that I answered that was, I said both. So it is both to grow and it is to be more inclusive, because one of the things that Giovanni Beckford had shared, Giovanni's been on our show 2 times. He's the man who reads more books than anyone we know, and he comes on kind of like at the end of each year and talks about the greatest books that we should read for personal development. He said, you know, Dominic, whenever I go to these personal development workshops, I'm the only guy who looks like me. I'm the only Black man in the room most times. We started talking about what are the reasons for that. And, you know, he had a number of his own perspectives. I think, Marcus, you were the one who really highlighted that when you came to, when we had that Zoom call with the men of color of our group, where you said, white spaces. Like, you're no stranger to white spaces because like you spent most of your life in there and like going from one white space to another. And this was something fascinating for me, Brian. You know, one of the other men in the group who gave me permission to share this story said, when I signed up for like the first workshop that I ran, he looked at the names of all the registrants on the list just to get a sense for, am I walking into a white space?
I see Marcus shaking his head up and down vigorously here. Yeah. So like,
yeah,
this is a common practice.
Because they were like, it's not that I'm unfamiliar with white spaces, but I do have to prepare myself to understand I'm going to be the minority when I walk in. And sometimes there's a code switching that has to happen. And the way that I remember that definition, and you guys can correct me, but code switching is I have a certain natural form of way of speaking in my environments, in my communities. But when I come into a white space, I cannot communicate the same way because it will make you uncomfortable. Or you will think less of me, or you think I'm less intelligent, or you think, you know, you'll be intimidated by me. So I have to use whitewashed language to make it seem like I fit in here. So there's this extra level of preparation that a non-white person has to do moving into a white space just to fit in, where Brian, you and I, you know, so many of the spaces that we walk into, we never have to think about that. It goes back to Giovanni's conversation of my whole life I've had to feel like I'm wearing a gravity vest that's 500% heavier to walk around my life than you do. So Marcus, Jay.
Well, for me, it's what you see is what you get. And that's been a long development. And part of it has been because I finally got tired of having to be uncomfortable for everyone else's comfort. And for me, I always call it the Leo syndrome. We don't have a middle ground. And so once we hit that spot where we're tired, it's like, you know what, this is what you get, take it or leave it. I have more than earned my seat at the proverbial table. So if you're not giving it to me, I'm taking it. And if you don't like it, fight me for it because I've earned it. I'm not interested in being given it because now you're like, this is what we need to do. It's the right thing to do. I no longer work on anything for diversity, equity, and inclusion if you can't tell me an end game. And I've always been thrown at that. My last company that I worked for, I actually made them admit at one point, I said, they asked me to go to an event. And I said, I will go on one condition. And they said, what? I said, I want you to verbally admit to me that I am your diversity dog and pony show. I'm the black guy in the company who has a tuxedo, who knows how to act, who has world experiences. You tell me that is why you send me the things and I will go. Other than that, not happening. And the discomfort on everyone's face there. And I told him, I said, just the way you felt right now, you felt that way for the past 30 seconds. I felt like that for the past 4 decades. So take that in and let that sink in and soak. Unfortunately, it's not something that's going to change overnight, and it's not going to change. I can't change it. Marcus can't change it. That ownership lies in the court of Brian and Dominic. The discomfort with each other and being outside of those different situations is only going to change. I don't really like the term minority, but when you look at it as a percentage of the country, we are a minority percentage. We make up, Black people make up 13% of the country. I don't know exactly all people of color. So when you look at the system that we have, because it is controlled by white people, you have the ownership to change it. We're tired of leading you to the water even. This has to be something, the purpose has to be not because you're being told this is the right thing to do. This has to come from your core.
Marcus, I think it was you mentioned a word earlier. The word was power sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help us understand what that looks like? What is power sharing, even within the context of the great man within?
So what does that look like? Most people, not all people, most people that are in a long-term relationship, whether it's a marriage or a partnership, right? Someone leads something. There are things that people have. So like the power is shared within the relationship and within the house. When it comes to organizations, sometimes what you find is that you have the white people up top and there is no power for anyone else to see someone that looks like them at the table. So like there is no power shared. Like we're always answering to someone who is white. What we find now is that there is a white awakening because white people are losing power and they are doing everything they can to hold on to it because they don't know what else to do because they don't know how to share power, right? They know how to hoard it. They know how to say, here is a space. Yeah, Jay, come to this space, right? Because I know that you can speak the King's English. You own a tuxedo. You have been to all these countries. Like you can come to this space because I know that you're non-threatening to me. And so like, I know what to do with you. But if the Jay that shows up on a Saturday in the summer, they don't want to see that Jay, right? Because that's the Jay that like, they don't know what to do with. They know how to judge it. Whereas white men get to fuck up all the time and still have the power in the space because we make excuses for them and their behavior. A white man that I teach at a university here in New Jersey, and a white man sent an email out because a professor wrote an article about Black Lives Matter, right? And it was literally like, Black Lives Matter is racist, all lives matter. That's what God said. We don't talk about Black on Black crime. We don't talk about unless they're children. And it was like all the things that made me feel unsafe. I sent an email to the president and to the vice provost. And they said to me, why are you spending so much energy being concerned about what he said? It's not a big thing. And I responded, that is the same way that we ended up what happened on January 6th. Because we just make excuses. We like forgive them. But Trayvon Martin was just a little Black boy walking in his own neighborhood with Skittles and an Arizona iced tea. Michael Brown was just another Black boy in Ferguson. Black boys don't get a chance to be boys. It doesn't matter how educated they are or we are, what we do. At any moment, whiteness can be used as a weapon.
We saw that, Marcus, in the at the same time that George Floyd went down, there was that incident in Central Park where the woman's name escapes me, but she was the one who threatened, I forget the man's name now, but
the bird watcher,
the Black man who saw a woman with her dog unleashed in like the area of Central Park where dogs could eat these birds. And he was like, please leash your dog. And she kept threatening, I'm going to call the police. And I'm going to tell them an African-American man, she said that 3 times. I'm going to tell them that an African-American man, will not leave me alone. And I remember Trevor Noah from The Daily Show afterwards, he was just like, that is like a precise form of institutionalized racism, like she knew by repeating the word African American 3 times, that she was using that as a weapon against him, where she knew that she could put his life at danger for that. Those moments that are so commonplace. This morning, I was just scrolling through Instagram. I follow this account called No White Saviors, which is really an account based on, it's like, listen, if you want to be an advocate around changing, being part of the solution around racial injustice and equity, then white people, you are not the starring role. You are the supporting role. That's the thing that they like, No White Saviors. And the account today showed how when a white person experiences mental illness in this country, it can save your life, right? If there's a white person who's showing signs of mental illness on the streets, police have shown over and over again, or mental health professionals have shown over and over again, that's like, okay, we can disarm this person in a safe way and get them the help they need. Black man does that, he's gunned down. If there's like a black man running around with his shirt off and he's like having like, say like a psychotic break, that guy is considered dangerous. And the first thing that happens is guns are drawn. And then it's the police felt unsafe. When a police person feels unsafe, then it's justifiable to shoot, to fire a weapon. But they've shown over and over and over again that white people in those same situations are constantly disarmed without any violence. So these are just kind of the things that you guys through our conversations have turned me on to through our own awareness. And to go back to where we started this question, Brian, about power sharing, Marcus, when you brought that term up, that's where this episode came from. We were like, hey, why don't we get a couple of guys from this call and put our voices on a show? And I think this is like one of the first of a number of conversations that we would love to have about these types of topics so that we can get comfortable in the discomfort. Because Jay, like you said, man, what we feel for 30 seconds on a given day, you felt for 4 decades of your life. And like Brian and I, we got to start to live that example more often.
Yeah. The struggle is finding out who's genuine because I am no longer interested in being the friend and I have a black friend.
How can you tell then? What would be indicators that would allow you to know that someone's genuine?
It's, and maybe sometimes it's a man thing, but, I talk to friends of mine and I don't need you to solve my problems. I'm not asking you to fix the world. What I'm asking you to do is listen. The best example I gave to a friend of mine. I said, you know what? I'm sure you are annoyed. I'm sure you're sick of hearing the damn term white privilege. You know what? But I will never tell you you're wrong for being sick of that. You know why? Because I don't know what it feels like to say that. So I can't sit there and tell you, you know what? You shouldn't be annoyed with this. I can't put myself in your shoes because I don't experience that. So when you tell me you're annoyed, I listen and I take that into account with your feelings. The same way that I would ask for you, I was telling a friend of mine once, I said, there's a reason whenever we all go out, you guys jokingly say, am I waiting for, why do I have to see the door? And I said, I will tell you guys this. I said, I live in a world where I have to be prepared that if something goes down and I'm always the only one in the group, I said, honestly, guys, I don't know who of you would have my back. So I need to know how to take care of myself. And I said, that is my every day. And that is my every time I go out with you guys. And in that conversation, the woman who probably knows me, the person who knows me better than anyone, the woman who raised me, my mother was sitting across from me when I had this conversation with a guy who I've referred to as my best friend. And I'm honestly, I'm reevaluating that right now. Through everything that went on last summer, I began to realize that he does not see beyond his own experience. And he thinks that because I am currently one of his best friends and his high school best friend was black, he sees the experience. Well, he had a 2-minute taste of what I've gone through where he was out of town and he saw some guys talking on a street corner. And as I'm telling this story, as he told me, and, he's big in his faith, and it was a guy preaching. And someone asked him if he was prepared to die for what his people have done to black people. And they just start verbally attacking him. And he told me, and he goes, I did nothing to them. I did nothing to deserve that. And I let him go on and on for 2 minutes. And I said, it was absolutely terrible, wasn't it? Said completely undeserved and something that you can't conceive of in this day and time happening to you. And he said, yeah. And I said, take that feeling that you have And think about the fact that your best friend is 42 years. I was 42 at times, 42 years old. I feel this every single day. And you won't give me the courtesy of understanding it. Not only do I feel it, I have a 7-year-old and 8-year-old nephew who is the love of my life. And I look at the world and how it will view him. And I get up every day thinking, what part can I do to make this world better? Because I want to leave this world knowing or feeling more comfortable that I will never get that phone call that he was just being him and things went left. And that is something that, no, Dominic can't fix, Brian can't fix, but it starts with hearing it and saying, we have to change this. And if we are just part of the movement, we have to do everything we can do, but it has to come from within. There has to be an intention and a purpose, not just because it's the right thing to do.
That sounds awful, to live in a world where you have to know where the door is at any given time. It makes me wonder how, when you feel like that, it's even possible to grow. I think it's the first time, Jay, that when Giovanni said he felt like he's wearing that vest, like weighs 500 pounds more than anything else anybody else has to wear, it's the first time I've actually felt through your story what that might be like in real terms. That sounds awful.
It definitely is. And what's even more awful is that my own mother looked at me and said, I never knew that you felt that way. She goes, I know my friends since I was a kid, between the schools I went to, the profession, like Dominic, I work in financial services. I am literally the one at so many conferences and at so many meetings. I have gotten so used to it that in my mind, I'm like, you know what? You play the hand that you were dealt and you play it the very best that you can. No one knew that I felt that. And it felt like I took off that 500-pound vest by saying that, because I had never even allowed myself to verbalize it, because I knew. And seeing someone who looks like you lose their life on television, it just, at that point, that's why I was like, you know what? The gloves are off. The disrespect is so blatant and okay that me keeping the gloves on, I'm not doing anything other than perpetuating it. And I'm done doing that. I don't know how I'm going to change it, but I'm going to do everything I can. That came from seeing that and looking at my nephew and saying, I owe him to leave this world in a better place than I stepped into it. And God damn it, I'm going to do it however I can.
Yeah. And I will also say, I also always have to see the door, but I was raised that way. Like all the men in my life, we always sat and so we can see the door. So when I go out with my Black friends, my Black male friends, we often have the conversation of who's going to sit looking at the door. Or we don't have to have the conversation because I know that he thinks like I do and he's going to have my back. There is no question, right? It's like you sitting there today, you know what that means, right? Some shit go down, somebody come in here and I need to run. You fucking tell me first, right? And so I think the other part of that, I think what we forget is it took a fucking pandemic for the world to realize that there was a fucking race problem. Had we not been in a pandemic, it would have been just another Black man who was killed and we would have went on with our lives. It forced white people to stop and say, fuck, there is a problem. When Black people have been saying there is a problem all the time, right? And so they say, you're equal. We gave you this opportunity, and it's not about equality, it's about equity. There's a difference because we didn't start from the same place. If you are running a race in track, right? We all start at the same line. Whoever gets there first, who gets there first. How you train is how you train. But equity is you are giving me the resources I need to get to where you are. It's if someone's in a wheelchair and they want to buy a house, we got to make the house wheelchair accessible. Equity for them to get in, right? You're giving the resources that they need to ensure that they have what they need to be successful, to have what they need access to. And people think, oh, well, I gave you a SVP job, but you didn't give me the resources I need to be successful. You just gave me a job to say, look at our numbers. The diversity has changed. Whenever I interview for jobs, I always say, well, what are you going to do to set me up to be successful? And they can't answer the question. And I go, well, this isn't the place for me because you don't know, right? You just wanted this like Black man or BIPOC person, because that's our new term, which I hate with a passion, right? Like you want this BIPOC person to say, yes, I accept that. I accept what you're giving me and I will work hard, right? Because one thing I know is that when you give a person an opportunity, I will say me, I will say Jay, because he works hard as hell as well. I won't speak for all people. I'm going to do my damn job and I'm going to do it well. And it's going to make you look good. But what's in it for me, right? I'm not interested in just serving you anymore. What is in this for me?
Marcus, I like this concept of equity where like, yes, the job and the resources. And I like the concept of, I don't want to sit at the table. I want to build the table with you. I'm curious. I'm afraid of what the answer might be here, Marcus. But the question is anybody doing this well right now? Is there anybody out there that you could look at, whether it's an organization or even an individual, that you're like, they've got it. This makes sense.
I need everyone to go to SpaceOnWriter, SpaceOnRyder.org. I want you to look at their action plan. In the midst of Black Lives Matter, I want you to look at everything that they said they're going to do, because here's what they said. We are going to do this. This is who is in charge of it. This is how you can hold us accountable. In their job descriptions, they have taken out like education, because education don't mean you can do the damn job, just mean you got a degree. That's what it means. It means you got a degree. Like, why do you need a bachelor's degree to be an administrative assistant? That makes no fucking sense. So what have you just done? You've said to Black women, because normally women are assistants, that like, you don't belong here.
Marcus, I'm going to link that in the show notes because the action plan. And I love what you said there about this is what our plan is. And this is how you hold us accountable. Like that second part is something that's been missing from a lot of these conversations. So I want to add that in there and I'll put that in the show notes. One of the other resources that I want to offer up for white people that has helped me to understand the experience that both of you men talked about with the door and your back and like who's got it. I read the book by Ta-Nehisi Coates called Between the World and Me. You know, it's basically like a book that he's written for his son, I think who's like 7 or 8 years old, and kind of preparing his young Black son for what the world looks like. You know, one of the key messages I took from that book was, as a Black man, your body doesn't belong to you, right? Like your body is constantly in danger and threat of, you know, if like you're Trayvon Martin, you know, walking around with like your Skittles in Arizona, or Arizona iced tea, you may be threatened. If you're someone who gets pulled over by the cops, like your body's threatened. So it brought the new sense of awareness to me around the daily existence of non-safety, like a Black man feels or can feel living in this country. So I would highly recommend that. I'm going to link that book in the show notes. And one more thing that I want to dive into a little bit deeper here before we have to wrap this conversation is something that Jay, you said in kind of passing, but I think is extraordinarily important. You said that there's one of your friends who cannot see beyond his own experience. And this is huge. Like a man who's constantly got, you know, but what about, or, but that's not been my experience, or, you know, I grew up in this environment. I didn't see racism, or I don't see race. I don't see differences. I don't see color. But what about? What is it for someone who is unwilling to see beyond his own experience or has been incapable of that to this point, to step off his own stage? Brian, this is like Eric Maddox, the interrogator who captured Saddam Hussein. He said that like one of the most critical tools he was able to use in influencing someone else was to step off his own stage, to get out of his own world, and then to actually go into the world of someone else, which allowed him to build trust and rapport so he could understand that other human. How do you guys, have you found it effective? Like what tools have you found effective in getting a man who can't see beyond his own experience to start to open up and be like, oh, okay, I can hear you differently now? Because we want to be those people who can see beyond our own experiences, but also to lead other men to see outside of what they've experienced so far in their lives.
Honestly, unfortunately, it's rare and it takes a lot of time. A friend of mine actually, he's a white guy, He calls it whitesplaining. And I had never really used that term. That's what it always comes down to. I have an example, just talking politics with everything that went on that January 16th, everything that went on. A friend of mine was saying, I can't believe this happened. And I said, really? I go, you people have been doing this for centuries when you don't get your way. And I said, think of George Wallace, a guy who I was Facebook friends with, actually came on and rationalized and explained how George Wallace changed his tune after he was shot and paralyzed. And it was at that moment I said, you know what? If you can sit here and make somebody like George Wallace and make it seem like it's okay that he called for segregation forever because he found Jesus after he was shot and paralyzed, you are a lost cause. This is the first one of those guys. He's the first people to say, I don't see color. Yet if I say something that disagrees with him, he goes off the rails. What it comes down to, Dom, is it has to be, a person really has to be able to say two words that people don't like to see. I'm wrong. Someone has to see where they're not right and has to be willing to say, I'm going to take the criticism from you so long as you will then tell me or help show me where I need to take my thinking to change my ways. Like Marcus, I'm sick of being your teacher. Like I'm sick of telling you what to do. It's a journey I'm willing to go on with you, but it has to come from within your heart, and you have to actually want to change, and you have to be able to realize where you're wrong. For my friend I mentioned, who I told, who had the experience of being called out on something based solely on his race, I can't say that it changed him, but I think that experience finally gave him a taste of, wow, some fucked up shit. And it's like, oh, okay, maybe my Black friends aren't making this up. Maybe they're not exaggerating and being dramatic. Because I'll tell anybody, you really think I get up every day saying, I can't wait to go out and cry to the world that because I was born Black, I don't get my fair shake? You meet me for 2 minutes, you know that all I want to do is get up, live, love, and be fashionable while doing so. That's my goal every day.
You're kind of nailing it, Jay. Just from an outsider's perspective, you're kind of nailing that.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you. But I want to be able to do that, and I don't want to be given my fair shake. I earn my fair shake. I want my respect. You know, as they say, put some respect on my name. And until white men particularly, because white women get it more so than white men. That's been my experience. Until white men realize, you know what? I don't have to give up my power so that this Black man can have power. There's enough for us to go around, because I'm not going to be good at things that he's at. He's not going to be things I'm good at. Me personally, I don't want to be around people I'm holding down, because if you're beneath me, it's only a matter of time before you're dragging me down there with you. I got time for that. So I'm trying to empower you so that we can all go out and take this world together. That is where more white men need to get to. You having power doesn't mean I don't.
Great. I think that, Jay, you said something that, like, I'm going to go back to. It's like white men have to get used to being uncomfortable and know that it's okay to be uncomfortable. Like, it's quite okay to be uncomfortable. And it's quite okay not to know. Stop pretending that you know everything, because I don't need you to save me.
Yes.
I don't need you to save me. I'm okay. I got this. I've been doing this a long time. Right? And when white people come to me and want to talk about things, I ask them this one question. I say, what are you willing to sacrifice for my freedom? And that doesn't mean that I'm not free, because I'm very free. But like, you have to be willing to sacrifice something in order for me to say, okay, what are you willing to give up? And when we talk about like the police, I was in Little Silver, New Jersey. Little Silver, is that a place? Yeah. That's a place.
Yeah, it sounds like a place.
It sounds like a place. I was in Little Silver visiting one of my friends who happens to be a white man. And I followed him in my car to go somewhere else. I told him, I said, I guarantee you the cops is going to stop me because I don't belong here. 90 seconds later, after following him, the blue lights came on and they stopped me. My family programmed me like when a cop stops you, you get everything out. You don't need them to look in your car. You have your registration, your ID out, right? Like I had the whole thing in process, right? Like it was all there. So my friend gets out of the car because he stops and he walks towards my car while the police is walking towards my car. And I go, that's fucking white privilege.
Yeah, getting out of your car and walking to a cop car.
You were able to get out of your car and not get shot. And so like, I say, I want the police to treat me like a white man. Treat me like you treat the white man because we all pay taxes, right? But you don't see that because you've been programmed to think that I'm threatening. If we want to like go down to the purest form of it, everything Black is seen as dark and wrong. White is seen as purity and cleanliness. We've been programmed to think that white is the norm for a very long time because it's purity, it's clear, it's serene. And until we like understand that, like Black people have been called colored, Black, the N-word, Negro, African-American, everything. And I've been the same complexion my whole life. When I get mad, I don't turn red. When I die, I don't turn purple. I stay the same brown skin complexion, right? It's like, accept me. And when you say you don't see race, I tell people, fuck you.
Yeah, Marcus, like both you and Jay were on that one around like the person who says, I don't see race. And you're like, fuck you. Why is that your reaction?
Fuck you because you're telling me that I don't deserve to be seen. You're telling me that like my whole existence does not matter to you. You don't see me. You don't want to understand me. You don't want to know my experience. You want to be comfortable. And I don't have fucking time for that. Because I'm Black. Blackity black, black, black. And have been my whole Black ass life.
For me, you're human. We all see color. It's not something that's wrong with it. It's how you react to it. Like Marcus said, I'm Black every day. Depending on the month, I'm either Drake or Chris Brown, based on the sun I've had. But I see color, I see white people. It's okay.
It's okay.
It doesn't make you a bad person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, guys, like, to put a bow on this, and this has been an awesome conversation, the first of hopefully many. Would love to bring you guys back on the show. I know that Joel Buckner, another guy we want to bring on the show as well. For our listeners, if you've been listening today and you've been listening intently, hopefully you're starting to ask yourself different questions. If you start to feel uncomfortable about some of the conversations that you're hearing today here too, that's also part of the process. And Marcus, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the discomfort's coming up, if anything that Marcus or Jay said made you feel uncomfortable, resistant, or defensive, that is an opportunity for you to look at yourself, right? And to go deeper into this, to step beyond your own experience and to listen to a perspective that perhaps you haven't heard before. Because I think that one of the things that I see that's so frustrating when I try to broach conversations with other white men and women around conversations of race is anytime the discomfort kicks up, it's like the sword and the shield gets drawn and someone tries to defend themselves about why they're a good person, why they're not racist and how they don't want to feel this way or don't want to be labeled. That I see as the antithesis of a great man. Like I believe a great man can actually go in, feel that thing, feel those uncomfortable feelings and then listen because you guys are not attacking. That's not what you're doing here. You're here educating. You're graciously giving up your time to educate us, like, and you're sick and tired of it already, right? Like, and you've said that. So to look at it from a totally different lens of like, we have an opportunity to be better, to listen more deeply and to look at ourselves in ways that we haven't before. And I think one thing I will do in the show notes is reference a whole bunch of resources like Emmanuel Acho's series on uncomfortable conversations with a Black man, Layla Saad's Conversations About Me and White Supremacy, which is a great book and a workbook that I've read and done some of the work on. Instagram accounts I'll post that you can start to follow to educate yourself more frequently around this stuff because like all that information's out there. Brian, is there anything else that you wanted to hit on, man, before we wrap too?
Yeah, man, I'm just reflecting on this conversation with Jay and Marcus here, and I was starting to ask myself the question, when's the last time I felt uncomfortable? And embarrassingly, the last time I felt uncomfortable, I was walking down the street in Williamsburg. There was a Black guy in the corner selling a CD, and we walked by him on the sidewalk, and he said, "Hey, you want to buy a CD?" I said, "No, thanks." I kept walking with my girlfriend, and he goes, "Oh, it's because you're racist. Oh, because you don't like Black people." And holy shit, did I, like all of the energy just came up into my chest. I got scared. I didn't say anything. I just walked away. Went to get something to eat with my girlfriend, finished up, had to walk the same direction back. And I said, shit. I almost wanted to go to a different block. And so that's when I felt uncomfortable. And it's embarrassing that that's maybe the only time I can think of in recent memory. But what I'm thinking, Marcus, you mentioned something like, what are we willing to give up? I believe that that's true. I believe you that there are things that we need to give up. And I think that there's an upside to being uncomfortable. And I see this in both of you. And I wish I can see this in myself going through an experience like that. And I think it's resilience. If I had to go back to that situation, I would have loved to have a conversation with that guy. I can understand his perspective more. Like, he probably loved making me feel uncomfortable. He's felt uncomfortable his whole fucking life. So this conversation has really given me a better understanding of why, like, that being uncomfortable is something that, as you said, Dominic, we pull out our shields and our swords instead of just sitting in that and being okay in it. And that's really helped me. That's where I want to get better for sure.
Marcus, you get something to say on that?
He was fucking with you in a way that, like, black people fuck with white people all the time. All you had to do was turn around and say, nah, brother, just not today. Like, I just don't want it today, right? But it made you so uncomfortable that you didn't know what to do in that situation, which is what black people have. Like, we have to be on it. When someone says something to us, we have to be ready to respond to it. You don't have to be ready.
Okay, gentlemen, now it is time to take action from something that you learned from Marcus or Jay regarding this uncomfortable conversation with black men that you are going to implement in your life right now. What is one insight that you're going to take away? What's one new account you're going to follow on Instagram that was recommended? What's one book you're going to read? Are you going to go to the website that Marcus recommended? All that stuff is listed in the show notes. And if you'd like to become a part of our community where you get a chance to meet Jay and Marcus, the Facebook group, which is listed in the show notes, they're highly active in, so you can go there, join us if you aren't already there. Or if you're already in the group, go shout them out. Let them know what you learned. Thank them for their time and their wisdom. And you can also have an opportunity to join the Digital Mastermind, which is an investment-based program. Like, you pay to be a part of that ongoing personal development work, where both Marcus and Jay are involved as well. And you can check that out in the show notes. We'll see you in there.